Atari and Nintendo, necessities for gracious living.
Throughout gaming history, many partnerships formed that, if successfully maintained, would have changed the course of gaming forever. Perhaps the most well-known of these examples is the working relationship once held between Sony and Nintendo, where the pairing would work together to create a Super Nintendo with a CD drive, known as the Nintendo PlayStation. This project got far enough along before being canned that prototype hardware exists out there, further emphasising that this actually happened. As we all know though, the partnership would fall through. Sony would launch their own console and the gaming landscape would be changed forever. Years before this, another collaboration was in place between Nintendo and another of history's gaming Goliaths, Atari. The company dominated the North American console market throughout the 70s and early 80s. In fact, when looking to enter the American console market, Nintendo would look to the success of Atari and reach out to them to broker a deal to crack the US market themselves. Plans would be underway to release the 8-bit Nintendo Famicom as the Atari Entertainment System stateside. So, keeping this in mind, let's look at the story behind this interesting turn of events, but just as poignantly, why it was never to be. So, without further ado,
I am Lady Decade, and this is the story of the Atari Entertainment System.
let's set the scene. The year is 1981, and the gaming landscape vastly differs from what we have today. Atari continued their dominance over the home console market in North America. In contrast, as of the 31st of July that year, Nintendo began to have its first significant success in the world's largest video game market. This came in the form of the excellent Donkey Kong. This arcade hit, designed by the legendary Shigeru Miyamoto and produced by the fantastic Gunpei Yokoi, was unlike anything gamers had ever played. It broke new ground by using graphics as a means of characterization, even going as far as to include cutscenes to advance the game's plot and integrate the game's various stages. Going a step further in storytelling than Pac-Man before it, Donkey Kong would dominate the arcade market.
Now, as we know, when a game makes bank in the arcade, the natural progression would be to release a home port or two of said game. And that is precisely what Nintendo intended to do.
Of course, everyone under the sun wanted the rights to produce the Donkey Kong game, including Taito. Still, it would be the likes of Atari and Coleco that really interested Nintendo. Ultimately, Coleco would be awarded the rights to produce Donkey Kong cartridges on home consoles, along with all tabletop versions of the classic, due to Nintendo President Yamauchi believing they were the hungriest company. On the other hand, Atari was granted to develop home computer versions of the game, so Nintendo developed working relationships with both entities. Working with both video game giants maximised Nintendo's chances of further profiting from Donkey Kong's success, a plan that, to some degree, must have worked tremendously when we considered that 15 million copies of home console conversions were sold of the game. Still, Nintendo dreamed even bigger and wanted a home console hardware presence in the region. At the beginning of 1983, Nintendo released the 8-bit Famicom in Japan, a system that would quickly become the most popular game console in Japan's history. But to reach a maximum-sized audience before the system even being released, Nintendo had plans for this platform in the US.
Could an 8-bit Nintendo console really break the already oversaturated US market? Well, does the Pope shit in the woods?
As far back as 1980, Yamauchi had established Nintendo of America, a US-based company branch with Howard Lincoln functioning as vice president. This gentleman had been in regular contact with Atari due to Nintendo's desire to have Atari distribute the Famicom in the US. The reasoning behind this was that Atari already had several strong relationships working with various distribution chains, and Atari was a well-known and established gaming brand in the region. Furthermore, the Atari VCS, or 2600 as it would later be known, was an aging piece of hardware, and 1982's Atari 5200 was not the smash hit successor it had been intended to be. Atari had little to lose when negotiating with Nintendo, and a mutual agreement could be agreed upon that would benefit both parties. During '83, Howard Lincoln and then Nintendo President of America Minoru Arakawa would fly out to broker a deal with Atari. Much back and forth would occur, with Howard Lincoln eventually claiming to Atari that the president of Nintendo, Yamauchi, was losing his patience due to how long things were taking, with finally Ray Kassar, the Atari CEO, approving a deal.
The Atari Entertainment System was on its way. Or was it?
A draft deal from June of 1983 reveals that upon signing, Nintendo and Atari would begin a partnership whereby many terms and conditions would be set out and agreed upon, including the likes of minimum order requirements, delivery dates and other fees, and even granting Atari the distribution rights to create Famicoms in their own Atari shells and sell them in every country around the world outside of Japan. Other nuances had also been settled upon. These included allowing Atari the right to program for the system with the full assistance of Nintendo. A term of 4 years with a 3-year option of renewal had also been laid out. The deal was set to be signed during the Consumer Electronics Show of 1983, with the Chicago-based event functioning as the day the two companies would unite further.
So, bearing this in mind, what could possibly go wrong? Well, one word I guess. Coleco.
Atari and Coleco were fierce rivals in the console and home computer markets. As mentioned earlier, Atari held the license to produce Donkey Kong games for home computers, and Coleco had the license to be able to create Donkey Kong games for home consoles. During the trade show that year, they would demonstrate a version of Donkey Kong they had produced running on their Adam home computer, which would subsequently cause to hit the fan and all hell to break loose. Seeing Donkey Kong running on the Coleco Adam instantly bred distrust between Atari and Nintendo. Atari felt that Nintendo had double-crossed them by allowing Coleco to make a version of Donkey Kong that ran on a home computer. It is speculated that the success of Donkey Kong was one of the critical reasons that Atari was interested into going into business with Nintendo on a console in the first place. To see this at a trade show had them incensed and heavily questioning going ahead with working with the Japanese company. Now, what's rather interesting, and to muddy the waters further, is that the Adam could run Coleco's Donkey Kong because the hardware was compatible with all ColecoVision software and accessories. While Coleco had only ever produced home console versions of Donkey Kong, they later decided to manufacture a home computer capable of playing home console games. Perhaps they had found a legal loophole to get around their contracts with Nintendo. Who knows? Apparently, until dealing with very angry communications with Atari, Yamauchi and Nintendo had no idea Coleco was doing this, let alone showcasing Donkey Kong on their computer at the Consumer Electronics Show. Yamauchi would reportedly give Coleco's Arnold Greenberg a rather strong talking to, with Coleco trying to justify the company's actions by explaining that the Adam looked like a home computer-like exterior with a video game-like console inside it, but to Nintendo, these were no more than excuses, perceiving that Coleco was trying to pull a fast one. After legal threats ensued, a compromise was eventually made that Coleco would no longer be allowed to use Donkey Kong to demonstrate the Adam's gaming capabilities, nor could it be used as a system pack-in game.
But while the Coleco deal was indeed intact, the Atari Nintendo deal was falling apart.
Just 1 month after the CES, Ray Kassar, who spearheaded the Nintendo Atari deal, would be fired from Atari following numerous accusations of insider trading. Further, the effects of the United States video game crash of 1983 were beginning to appear more and more apparent. Atari was laying off employee after employee and was hemorrhaging money. Many speculate that by the third quarter of 1983, Atari could no longer afford to make a deal with Nintendo. Following this period of chaos and turmoil for the US falling video game giant, by 1984, Warner Communications, who owned Atari, would sell the company to Jack Tramiel, the former owner of Commodore. As the dust began to settle, Nintendo would enter the US market in October 1985, with Super Mario Bros. Helping the Nintendo Entertainment System become the most popular game console in history, arguably eclipsing anything that Atari had managed to achieve previously. As for Atari in the home console market, they would return to the dance in May of 1986, releasing what was known as the Atari 7800 Pro system, with a marketing budget in the low millions compared to Nintendo's 16 million marketing budget. An argument could be made that the hardware was doomed to fail when put up against the NES. The Nintendo Entertainment System would end up controlling 80% of the North American console market, with all of Atari's home consoles combined only making up 12% of that generation. Things could have been a little different perhaps if it were not for the show that was 1983. However, many rumours have since circulated that Atari was only toying with Nintendo anyway to delay their US market entry while they worked on the 7800 and never intended to finalise a deal regardless. Regardless of your belief, this is a fascinating gaming story about a pivotal point in gaming history. It's interesting to see that before passing the torch in this era of US console gaming, the two companies at one point were negotiating to work on a console together, even if that pesky Coleco did throw a spanner in the works. Anyway, if this video sparked joy in your heart, why not check out my old upload covering the era in which a Sega PlayStation was close to being produced. Leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you again soon. Peace.